Welcome to Women Like Me, Stories in Business, the podcast that will captivate you with stories of success, resilience, and growth. Whether you're an aspiring entrepreneur, a curious mind, or simply seeking motivation and inspiration, you'll gain practical tips, innovative strategies, and actionable advice that you can apply to your own life and business endeavors. Now here's your host, business coach, and master persuader, Julie Fairhurst.
Well, welcome everyone to another episode of Women Like Me, Stories and Business. And I'm very excited today because I am here with one of our newest writers, Nicole DuPont, and her story is spectacular. You have to make sure you read it. So Nicole is a writer in volume 9 of our Women Like Me storybooks, and it is Women Like Me, Whispers of Warriors, Women Who Refused to Stay Broken. And when you hear Nicole's story, you will understand why she's in a book with this title. So thank you so much, Nicole, for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
So why don't you start off by just telling us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm in Edmonton, Alberta currently. I'm a massage therapist and just recently became licensed for insurance sales as well. I'm a mom, of course, and wife, and lots of other things, but those are the main.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't know that you were licensed for insurance. So that's interesting. So cool.
Yeah, just recently.
Well, good for you. Congratulations. That's good.
Thank you. Yeah, okay. Thanks.
So let's talk a little bit about your story and how everything progressed, because I think your story is going to be so helpful for women that are going through a divorce, a separation, or even struggling with family members when it comes to their children and their lives. And I think that's throughout your story, is you trying to regain control and take your life back, but having a zillion other influences out there that were not necessarily overly helpful for you.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Say that.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about that? So let's start off by, what was it like for you as a child when you grew up?
I have 3 siblings. I'm the youngest of 4. Grew up in the country on a farm, lots of animals and outdoor time. So that part was really good. It was nice to have that space and be able to have that freedom. My parents both suffered from addictions, alcohol. I don't know if anything else, to be honest with you. That was kind of the main one that was exposed while I was a child, which with it came a lot of domestic violence. And so, yeah, it was hard. Often neglect, abuse between my parents, abuse then that, filtrated down, not knowing any better, abuse between siblings. A lot of trauma, a lot of hard times as far as, trying to navigate life healthily in a loving environment. It was difficult. It was lonely. A lot of fear-based growing up, not a lot of security.
So can I ask you what kind of fears there were?
I think I was always fearful of my father, fearful for my mother, at the same time, for ourselves as well, my siblings and I. With addictions come volatile tempers, short tempers, inappropriate responses to child behaviors. And so unfortunately, there were a lot of different circumstances where, I was afraid for my sister or brother's punishments and vice versa. And often, had to witness some of that stuff, unfortunately. So yeah, kind of like living on eggshells or in that fight or flight type mode.
It's kind of like that you grew up feeling like in dread.
Yeah.
Just what's going to happen next.
Yes. Yeah.
And always on edge. That's not a that's a difficult way to grow up.
It is. Yeah, it
I
is.
think we carry that with us.
For sure. Yeah, it's still something, honestly, I was thinking about it today, having a conversation with a friend, and I'm like, I got to a point where if I didn't have chaos, I almost didn't know how to operate, because I was so used to being in it. Like you said, when I wasn't in it, it was when next, you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I know I grew up in a lot of chaos myself, so I totally got the whole dread thing. Yeah, it's not a comfy place, and you definitely do carry that with you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have 2 children.
I do. Yeah, they're adults now. Sarah
Yeah.
is 20 years old and my son Ryan is 18.
Yeah. And so there was a time early in your life where there was an issue that came up, and you had to fight to try to keep your children.
Yes. Yeah. It was my second divorce. I had left my husband, and he had primarily worked out of town. I had the children were with me 100% of the time, which was great. You know, I loved having them. And when he went forward with his life with a new partner, he had decided that he didn't want to contribute the income into my home for the kids, and had rather have them with him. And yeah, he didn't really give me an option. You know, it was this is how it's going. And of course, you know, as a mother, that's not what you want, and isn't the best for the kids at any stretch of the imagination. Show up at the house and show up on weekends that weren't his weekends, designated weekends, trying to take them. And yeah, a lot of violence again, and fear. You know, I had a camera on my house, and so I'd sit up at night, you know, late at night, fearful, is he going to come? Didn't sleep. And that's kind of what propelled me into a bit of a downfall, you know, as a mom, not having the support, not having anyone, not having the upbringing to even know how to support myself or find supports in the community, you know, as far as police or counselors or churches or things like that. And my family couldn't provide that, of course, because they had come from what I had come from.
Yes.
So
Yes.
yeah, it was unfortunate. And so yeah, my kid's dad decided to go to court, and had made up about 30 some odd points, alleging that I had starved my children, hadn't taken them to school, beat them, didn't feed them. I owned a gym at the time. I volunteered in my children's classroom twice a week. I went to church. I was a single mom. I was a nutritionist, went to church. So yeah, it was a really hard thing. You know, there was so many horrible things. Like the lawyer served me with these documents actually, I think at 4:45 the night before court, which is, I found out years later, is illegal. But yeah, just lots of malpractice, lots of corruption, you know, it's incredible, you know, like things you see on TV or movies where you go, that can't happen. It happens, you know, it really does. And yeah, I lost my kids that day in court. And basically the judge said to me, you know, if these allegations are true and they come back to you and something happens, it's my responsibility. And, you know, I was like, they're not true. And he said, it's not like criminal court, which at that time in my life, I had no experience with criminal court.
No.
And he said, it's not innocent until proven guilty. And so you'll just have to fight backwards. Their kids are going with their dad. And
that's interesting. So that's really interesting that the judge said, so it sounds like there was a bit of a doubt there, but he had to err on the side of caution.
That's what he did. Yeah, that's exactly what he did. So
which is really unfair.
It is unfair. Yeah, it is unfair. In fact, the criminal courts are way more fair. You know, I can tell you that now from experience, you know, they had EPOs put in place and no contacts that, you know, I didn't abide to. And yeah, you do get treated better as a criminal.
Wow.
It's interesting. Like you are given the opportunity to be seen as a believed, you know?
Yeah.
So that also was hard, because not only had I lost my kids, I all of a sudden was looked upon as though those things were true.
Mhm.
And, you know, that for worth and self-worth and, yeah, heartbreak.
Oh,
That's,
yeah.
yeah, that's really, you know, above all the injustice was that part, you know. I had raced home from the courts in hopes to say to my kids, you know, you're going to your dad's at least, and I'll see you, you know, soon. And when I got there, they were gone, and someone had picked them up early from school. So I didn't even get to say goodbye, and I didn't see them for months, you know, which then ended up being a 7 years. So
Wow. How old
yeah.
were they then when they were first taken from your care?
They were 8 and 9 years old.
That's so young. That's
Yeah.
hard. That must have been
Yeah.
very hard on them as well.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, I know. Within the first year, so within about 3 months, I did get a lawyer. I got supervised access back, sold my gym. Well, I mean, I was either going to sell it or lose it. That, my car, my home, moved in with a friend. I paid about $200 to $300 a visit to see my kids. Started selling cars. I took all that income and got just more visits, you know, so I could see them more often. And yeah, my daughter, you know, it was hard. It was hard for all of us.
Mhm.
Obviously, I couldn't tell them what was happening. You know, they were young, for one, and two, there's the supervisor recording everything you say, and so you can't involve the kids, right?
Right.
So yeah, it was, you know, my son, why can't we come home? What's happening? My daughter kind of checked out almost right away, and then within about a couple months, she started to get better and kind of started fighting back, I think, at home on their end.
Yeah.
Because they had, so anyways, let me backtrack here. The visits went good.
Yeah.
You know, normally you go then from your supervised access back to your, you know, shared custody, what have you. And the last time I saw my daughter in a visit, that was February 15th, I think, 2014. And she said, Mom, you know, I want more visits like this. Gave me a big hug. I promised her, you know, I would get more visits. And within a couple days, they went into court and said, kids are traumatized from seeing mom suspend all access indefinitely. So I think, you know, they felt threatened that the kids wanted to come back, and I botched it.
Did you say indefinitely?
Well, that was basically what the judge had said. By this point, we had a case management judge. You know, it was so high conflict that, you know, normally you go in a morning chambers, you have your judge this day, a different judge. They appointed it to one judge, and you can't go in for minor issues, like little changes. Like I'd like my weekly email about my children and my pictures, please. No, none of that. None of your regular joint custody rights are held up. Nothing. It has to be like a really big thing. So yeah, they went into court the next week and said the kids were traumatized from having access with me, which I believe was from being taken from their home and their mom. And I found out later on they had hospitalized my daughter. She had hit the stepmom, I guess, in the face in the morning, and they blamed me, of course. And yeah, took her to the mental hospital. She was, I think, 9 years old. You know, they had always said to me, oh, you have mental health issues and this and that. My family in particular, when I came out about my story and the abuse, and, you know, they had me institutionalized, threatened to sue me, all those things. So I knew where it was all coming from, you know. And but yeah, my daughter, I believe, had PTSD as well. By that point, you know, bladder control issues at 9 years old. And so they took her to a mental hospital and said, oh, her mom has mental issues. We think she does too. So my kids never got the help they needed, you know, never had counseling. They fought to make sure they never got counseling in the courts, that they never had a voice. I fought for lawyers for them. And, it's hard to fight with or against rather someone who has a lot of money, for one, and two, it was my entire family surrounding my ex-husband,
Right.
and I had taken a stand against their dad, whom also had addictions, cocaine addictions, all sorts of things like that. So, really, it was me just wanting to have a better life for my kids, separate myself and them from anything that was going to take us down a bad path, really, essentially.
Yeah. And so, and then you, when in the midst of all of this, you spiraled.
Yeah. So when they suspended all access, so I was in counseling the whole time, I had to be. And, when they suspended the access, I kind of gave up, I thought, what I felt like that was it, that was the end. I didn't have anyone. I had no support, I had no family, I had no friends left. I'd lost my community of even people from the gym, that I owned. I really had nobody, and thought, I don't know what I thought, but met a man, went on a date, thought I'm going to try and, keep myself occupied. I was still going to the gym and working out, wasn't drinking or anything like that, like still living a clean life. And he happened to be a cocaine addict. And so, used cocaine a couple times, and he was really bad, became very violent, almost lost my life to him. And within that, still suffering the PTSDs, memories from a childhood. And, that particular man had said, the only way you're going to get enough money to fight your ex is, if you sell your body. And I thought, well, if that's what it takes, then that's what it takes. It's a body, and I'll recover is what I thought. And so, that definitely went down, a bad path without a doubt.
It's, I mean, I didn't go through that kind of trauma, but I know, because I was a single mom for 24 years and I had my 3 boys, and had anybody taken my boys, I don't know what I would have done in the same circumstances. And I think you just probably went into survival mode, and just whatever it whatever.
Yeah, I definitely went into shock without a doubt. Like, I remember after that first court hearing, I think I drove around for 8 hours. I just drove, and a few people called me, I remembered, but I just was like, I didn't know what I was going to do. The first few weeks, I imagine it's what it's like when someone loses a child, their life. I'm grateful, I haven't had to experience that. But you don't eat, you don't sleep, you're holding their blankets and their teddies and their clothes and smelling them, and, like, does anything to remember them. Right. And, it was hard. I had some support from the church, with food and things like that. And honestly, the big thing I'm grateful for too was that I had a background in fitness. I was able to go, I know a lot of people with PTSD, the fitness is essential, for moving the body still and being able to experience some kind of health. So I ran every day, probably 2 to 3 hours a day, just to stay healthy and feeling kind of okay. I tried to eat when I could, and just tried to get back up on my feet. And I've always had that, the fitness part. Really, I'm glad.
Yes.
And the fight, with CrossFit, it's a workout that's, it's a mental workout a lot of the time. Your body, you have to push your body. It's not an easy workout.
Mhm.
And so throughout that, or throughout this still, I was like, I'm glad I had CrossFit because, a lot of the workouts are rounds of something or reps
Right.
of something. And I just would say to myself, like, another round, another court hearing, another this,
Yeah.
just like in my mind, I just use that analogy to try and keep me going through a lot of the battle.
Mm.
And yeah, I'm fortunate the drug addiction and that part of my life only lasted about 6 months. And I woke up one day and decided to turn my life to God and rented a room. I had a woman come and pick me up, said Jesus is risen on her house. just an ad in the paper. And I literally just sat in a room for about 2 weeks, read the Bible, detoxed, went to yoga, went to CrossFit, ran, went to church, and signed up at school to become an RMT. And the massage part then helped me with all this stored trauma that I had in my body, even as a child.
Mm.
I've done, I don't know how many hours of regular psychotalk therapy, CBD, DBT, EMDR, you name it, I've done it. I've been there. And massage, honestly, has been probably one of the top, that and EMDR for myself,
Mhm.
has been one of the top things that has helped really me get through and help me remember some of this stuff because, it's hard to process things and it's hard to forgive and it's hard to take the steps you have to really to take for yourself to move forward or for myself to move forward
Mhm.
without those memories, and that was kind of the journey. That's the reason I started the journey, I guess, was I wanted a different life. And
Mhm.
I knew, you can't blame everything else on everybody, but you have to look at your upbringing, right? You have to look at your surroundings
Yeah.
and who you've become because of them and take responsibility for that.
Yes.
And so, unfortunately, as much as I wish I could have just said, oh, well, I did for a lot of my life. It's my fault. This is my fault. You do have to look at how you were raised and
Yeah.
in the family dynamic and say, no, this isn't right. This isn't healthy. I choose this, whatever
Yes.
this might be, and get rid of the
You
old
know,
patterns.
that's such a profound thing that you just said, because I think so many of us want to blame and sure, it was what it was, but in order to be healthy and in order to have a better life, you have to take responsibility for who you are now.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that's so important because and just because it's hard to move forward, but I have to really give you a big hug, if I could, through visual here.
I'll
because
receive that.
because you've done that, and you were here and you went down, but you came back up, and that's what we need to do. There's no shame in falling down, but we got to get back up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
And so your life's not too bad now. A little better.
Yeah,
Tell
it's
us a bit
better.
about it.
Yeah, it's still been hard. A lot of the betrayal trauma, through the years in court, a lot of my family, and of course, my kid's dad lied on court documents, lied on affidavits, lied on big, huge bilateral assessments. We went through that twice. Anytime I was close to having my kids or any kind of reconciliation, their dad would do something to, thwart the efforts. Either, once it was not picking up Christmas gifts from me, that my daughter had asked for from me.
Mm-hmm.
And, in one of the meetings. And then another, that one was just in 2018,
Mm-hmm.
the second one. So they did one, and basically my whole family lied. No, there was never any abuse. Their dad, oh no, I didn't do anything wrong. They all sided against just me. And, the second round, as I'll call it, was better. I had support. I had been in live-in counseling. A friend of mine had a Christian women's home that I was invited into, thank God. Just amazing women, really amazing women surrounding me, literally holding me up daily, and so grateful for that. Through that, that strengthened me in ways I'm still looking at and going, wow, I'm so blessed to have had that. But the last court hearing, it was such a different picture. My ex's lawyer walked in disheveled, out of sorts for the first time ever in her life, that I had seen over 7 years of court battles. I had probably 30 people on my side of the courtroom. There was none on the other. The assessor that hadn't believed me came back and apologized to me, wore a tuxedo to the courtroom to help me, and the judge, at that point, I'm so glad you're doing better now, and I thought there was really nothing wrong with me at the beginning, but thank you. And she's like, I hope you enjoy time with your kids, and I thought, wow, I wish I had been spared all of that. I wish they'd been spared all of that. But people make mistakes, and that first judge made a mistake in my opinion, and I'm glad I didn't give up. And
Absolutely. And so your son is now with you.
Yes, he is. Yeah. So he's 18. Yeah. He came home when he was 15. So what ended up happening with the last court reconciliation, by that point, my kids were 12 and 13. So they had been gone, 5-6 years. And they came into the counselor's office. Their original response, I don't want to see my mom. Mm-hmm. So, and I was there, parked, waiting, and they came out of the building, saw me, and then my ex went and tried to have me charged with breaching a no contact again for like the 5th or 15th time, whatever. So, they alleged that the counselor alleged collusion. She quit again, second counselor that quit. And I kind of just gave up again. I've had so many of those moments where I'm like, why am I doing this? Why am I in this? And so, I, the police, of course, knew the history and didn't charge me. And, I just waited, I waited, I got remarried. It was June, I think, 2019. I missed a phone call from my son. He'd come home. I had been in the kitchen the day before. We had a home phone, and I felt like somebody punched me in the stomach. Like I almost fell to the ground. I was cooking rice. I'll never forget it. And my husband's like, what's wrong? What's wrong? I said, something's wrong. Something's wrong with one of my kids. And sure enough, the next day we hadn't heard the phone. There was a phone call from a stepmom's phone. So I called the police and I said, I feel like there's something wrong. I think it's my son. I need you to check on him. And they went, and sure enough, there had been a fight at the family home. I don't know what happened. But of course, there was still, so backtrack, no contact orders got put in place. The stepmom falsely, just in her mind, called the police. We think she's going to kidnap them. Oh. I had never tried to, mentioned it, appeared as though I was going to. But anyways, nonetheless, I couldn't call back, and they couldn't give me any information. And so I waited another year. And I got a piece of registered mail saying Ryan was in the care of some people I didn't know. And I called the police again and said, what's going on? They didn't give me the affidavit, of course. I had to ask for that, go to the courts. The lawyer didn't want to give it to me. But in the affidavit, it had said that my son had been taken to a mental institution. And he had been suicidal. I think he was just at the end too. And, had been using drugs as well, to cope with the pain.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, he was in an institution for 2 months. I had no idea. I had an inkling he was suicidal. In fact, I sent my husband over to their home, hoping I wouldn't get breached with third-party contact, with the reasoning that he's their stepdad and it's not third party. And I hope.
Yeah.
And because I had this fear that he had a fear for his life. And so, yeah, it ended up he had been. And so I finally got the affidavit. It said, we don't want to tell the mom. If we tell the mom, she's going to stop him from going. It was actually the stepmom's aunt and uncle. They put him in custody. The hospital wouldn't release him back to the care of his dad, of course, because he was on drugs and suicidal. And yeah, so I called the police and said, look, here's my 7-year story. Can you please go check on him, do a welfare check? So I called the city police. And there's, of course they have to. And so they did. And he knew then that I knew where he was. And then he called the police and said, if I leave here, do I have to come back? And they're like, no. And so he called. Yeah, he called. It was March 27th, 2020, right before the COVID lockdown.
Yeah.
And, that morning I said to my husband, I don't know if I can go on. I just don't know what to do. I was so medicated. I was on antidepressants, anti-anxiety, anti-panics, sleeping medications, you name it. I was on it, for any mental health stuff, just to stay emotionally stable and able to work a tiny bit. I'd already been put on AISH a few years prior, from emotional trauma.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I just kind of sat on the stairs, knowing then that he had been suicidal. I was afraid every day, like, is he gonna live? Am I gonna see him? And I went for a run, and when I came back, he had called, or no, he had messaged on Instagram. He said, Mom, I need you.
Oh.
So I jumped in the shower, like any mom would do. And he was so scared, like he was sending me pictures and having me send pictures of him to make sure I was who I was, and he left the place he was staying, and I picked him up on the street. And, they were forcing him to take a bunch of like really, really strong antipsychotic drugs, and I said, Ryan, there's nothing wrong with you. You've just been through way too much, way too much.
Oh.
Yeah. So yeah, I picked him up, and I was still kind of in shock, honestly. Like, it's still surreal.
Yeah.
But yeah, you look at your child and you just see that little baby, and there's that same little person. Yeah. So yeah, he came home.
Oh, well, that's wonderful. That is just wonderful. And so nice for him as well. Does he see his sister at all?
I don't think they see each other very much.
Oh.
Yeah. We so when I got him home, there was still no contact orders in place. So we basically had to go fight into the courts again, then to get some kind of, no contacts dropped, get some kind of parental whatever orders back in place.
Yeah.
They were only seeing urgent matters. I had to fight for that 3 times. This isn't urgent. I'm like, it's urgent. Like, if I am with him and somebody decides to get upset, I'm going to jail again. And I can't do that.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I got back into court. I had to get in an argument with one of the duty counsels, and, she was really upset and told the judge how upset she was with me, that I thought I should be heard in the court and yada, yada. And so the judge heard the case and called the stepmom and dad, or step aunt and uncle.
Yeah.
And when they went to call them back, when it was the courtroom, their phone was dead. So they couldn't even speak in the court, which was like divine intervention. Yeah. They couldn't say anything bad about me, which they'd never met me anyways. So I don't know how they could have.
Yeah.
And so then they finally had to get a hold of my Ryan's dad the lawyer and said, like, you cannot leave a child homeless on the road or force them to take, medications.
Yes.
So yeah, they allowed him to come home, legally.
Yeah.
And, after a couple months, things settled in. I asked for child support, of course, to help. And, my ex started threatening suicide to his son if I pursued that. And, basically said to me, if I tried to have a relationship with my daughter, that, there'd be another fight for Ryan, basically. Made me sign over.
But can there be at that age? Like, don't they have some say at that age?
Well, he would have. Yeah, he would have.
Yeah.
He would have. But, he had told my son, if you go live with your mom, I'll never speak to you again. Like, really mentally and psychologically abused him. Yes. And so, I thought rather than push the issue, I shouldn't say me, I wanted to push the issue.
Yeah.
Ryan didn't want to, because his dad was saying these things.
Yes.
And so then they said there was some conversation, there was some threats like that, like, we've not fought you about Ryan, which, I mean, really they couldn't have anyways, like you said.
Yeah.
But they wouldn't drop the no contact order between my daughter and myself. Mm-hmm. And so, that's still in place to this day. Although she's 19, I've contacted lawyers. They said she's 18 now. It doesn't matter if there's an order that her dad put in place when she was 8.
Yes.
It wouldn't stand in a court of law, obviously.
Yeah.
But I sent flowers to her this past Christmas. And, I had a flower deliverer person in Okotoks, where they're from, contact her to get the flowers to her. I sent some Christmas gifts. And the flower lady, her name is Nicole. And so she went, my daughter was staying in Calgary at her grandparents'. The flower delivery lady went, delivered the presents, delivered the flowers. She said, "Hi, it's Nicole. Here's the gifts for Sarah." Oh, yeah. So, like, my Ryan was like, "Why did you do that?" So, like, they're coming down on him, getting mad at him. They thought it was me. The grandparents, who've never met me and don't know me, thought it was me. Yeah. Everybody's trying to call police. Like, it's this
my goodness.
Big, huge, like, horrible thing. And I'm like, these people have never even met me. They've heard one side of the story, of like how things happened. Yeah. And so, after that, I thought, is this worth the kerfuffle it's causing? Like, now my daughter's in stress again, like those kinds of things. But the other part of me is like, I guess it just exposes who they are, like, they're doing everything to protect. My ex-husband's doing everything to protect a lie. Yeah. His intention was never, I want the kids. I miss them so much. Yes. It was, I'm not paying you child support. And if you don't give them to me, your life's on the line. Yeah. So it was never about, it's the intention, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, 19 is young. Hopefully.
Yes, it is.
Hopefully you'll be able to reconnect with her. And,
I
feel like one day we will.
Well, she's 20 now. So getting there.
Yeah. It's and hard for her too, because she's been living on the other side of all of that.
Yeah.
And and listening to all of that. So that makes it tough.
Yeah, I've done a lot of counseling, obviously, but spent a lot of time just on my own, YouTube, anything I can get my hands on educationally on every kind of health disorder out there, mental, emotional, psychological, every single one. Hours studied. And then as well, all the parental stuff, the parental dysfunction, the addictions, every addiction, every drug, every substance out there. I've either been through it or looked into it, and seen, like, wow, that's what this is. Reading, countless books. I can't even count the books I've read. Like you just do, right? Like, yes. I had that time to do so. So I'm glad, I did have that time. This is something I would have never done obviously, but there's been lots of good come from it. And
For sure.
one thing I watched, the parental alienation stuff, the videos there, was a grown up later on that had been alienated. And he's like, yeah, all of a sudden the parents are talking bad about my other parent. And, all of a sudden the coaches don't like them and the teachers don't like them and nobody likes them. Why would I like them? And I was like, wow, this is exactly what happened. Because that was the same thing. I remember talking to my kid's principal and they're like, wow, wouldn't it be a blessing if they were in your life again? And I thought, wow, who are you? Like, you've clearly only heard one side of that story. So it's unfortunate, right? They gain control, they alienate, they manipulate, and then keep the other parent out, right? So, when you have an opportunity to better yourself and you choose not to change the life of your child and yourself and their families, I'd do it.
No.
But the story might not be over yet. He may be in a position at some point to have to do the same. Right? So,
So, Nicole, I'm sure there's a lot of women that are going through or have gone through what you've gone through. And that's the thing I find about you is that you as horrible and as difficult as everything you went through, you never gave up. You kept at it.
I took some breaks. I had, fortunately that honestly, God's intervention, right before everything happened, I gave my life. I'd grown up with no spiritual teaching. I didn't know about God, devil, nothing about that. Met a girl. She was a yoga instructor at my gym, invited me to a Bible study. She's like, Nicole, you need God. I said, what's that? And walked in the room of her house and, without sounding too spiritual, felt like peace, just peace in that home. And I was like, I want that. And that kind of is what propelled me on the journey to say, wait, there's different people out there. These people don't have addictions. I met people who had never drank alcohol in their life. Never had premarital sex. All the things that were so foreign to me that actually intrigued me to think there is better. There is something out there. And so every time I've truly, turned my life back to God, even in those dark times of cocaine and addiction and prostitution or escorting, whatever you want to call it. As soon as I made that decision, and I had called a friend, I'm like, can I turn my life back to God? I was so afraid at that point. I thought God must hate me, and, because I gave my life to God and all of a sudden my kids were gone. So I was like, this is God? What is this? And that's unfortunate for me. I grew up in a home of violence and all of that, where your dad is not someone you see as safe and loving. You don't even know that exists. And I'm still on that journey. Honestly, like it's daily where God reveals little things to me and I'm like, wow, he does love me. He does hear me. He does see me. So it's been that. In times when I've tried to give up. That's how I kind of have, not measured, but like gone about life, to say, am I on the right path? Okay, I'm going to decide to do something. Let's see how it goes when I don't know, either because nobody taught me better or I just haven't experienced it. And one of two things will happen. Either things go well or they don't. And every time I stopped or thought, I need to just let this rest, and walk away, because I'd met many women too, crossed country, left their kids, started new lives. I met a woman, actually a friend of a woman, when I was at the RMT school, who had, when I first went to massage school, I was having panic attacks, memory flashbacks of my kids, just grief, the grief. And, I shared some of my story that kind of carried me into the counselor's office one day. And I came back out and I sat down, and another woman came up to me and she said, I have a friend who went through almost the same thing you did. And she's like, don't give up. And her friend had taken her own life.
Oh.
And so, yeah. And left her kids. So in that moment, I thought for that woman too, I can't. Like, not only that, I think because of the injustice in my, the betrayal hurt so bad, it made me fight back because it wasn't right. Innately we know right and wrong.
Yes.
And when something is not right that's been done to you, you want it righted. You want to make it right, right?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. So of course, yeah.
Yeah. So really that, like, hearing other women's stories.
Yeah.
And every time I was like, okay, I'm gonna stop. Maybe I just sign over custody.
Mm-hmm.
My life went downhill.
Yes.
Way downhill. So I thought, this isn't my journey. This isn't my journey. I don't get to give up, because if I give up, I go down the path of, feeling like I'm gonna, give up my life. So that's mainly, why I felt like I didn't have a choice, because when I chose to give up, I couldn't. I don't know. Yeah.
Tell to women who are listening, what would you, that maybe you're going through what you're going through, what advice would you give them because you've got a lot of knowledge, you went through a lot. So what would your advice be to them going through something similar?
Honestly, trusting that God will always be there,
Mm-hmm.
that he's good, even in the shit times you can't understand. There'll be that in life. There'll be stuff that will never make sense in the moment, that you can't fathom. You can't understand why is this happening?
Mm-hmm.
And later on, you see little glimpses of, my story, right? There's been other women that I've been able to talk to and help that have gone through court systems and things like that. And we're asked to live sacrificially for other people. We're not here for just ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a hard thing to fathom too, right? Like, we all want to be self-centered. We all want the world to revolve around us, and have things our way, and our nice little stories all packaged up in a box. But yeah, I would say that, prayer works. The Bible's real. And coming from someone like me who never believed in anything, including myself, it's a big step of faith for me to even say that, I think, publicly, honestly, because my life hasn't always reflected that.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And
so really, it's what you're saying is support. You have to have support. There has
belief. Belief in yourself.
Yeah.
Your values, hold true to your values.
Yeah.
And that makes it worth
it. Isn't that the goal as a parent?
I think so. Yeah. Without a doubt.
Is to do everything we can to make sure that our kids don't have to deal with what we dealt with, or what our parents dealt with, or what our grandparents dealt with. Somebody somewhere in the family has to stop that and cut that chain. Yeah. And that's what you're doing. That's what you've done. That's what I'm doing. Yeah, for sure. And because I think especially as women, when we can do that, men of course are important as well, but women, we're their nurturers. We're kind of the glue that holds things together. And I just really feel that as a female, if we can get ourselves healed and together, then we get to pass that along to our kids. And it's every book, every word is like an awakening to something that we weren't aware of before, because you can't. I think it's Oprah who said, you can only do better when you know better. Yeah. But until
the same, a hard thing for me, growing up, a lot of shame, and, that for me was huge. You know, you don't have to feel shame for things you've done or things you've been through. Like, you can only be who you know you are before you know you can be somebody better, like you said. Exactly like you said. Yeah.
Oh, well, Nicole, I don't even know what to say. I just, it's such a traumatic thing that you've had to go through. My heart goes out to you. My heart goes out to your daughter and to your son. But I'm just so proud of you and so happy that you are where you are, and that you've got a good head on your shoulders, and I just know you're going to help your kids down the road, and I know that you've got a dream of opening a shelter for women and men to help with people that are going through rough times in their lives.
Yeah.
You know, and it's so funny because you know, if we can take what we went through and heal ourselves somewhat, that opens up the door to actually help other people.
For sure.
You know, and it doesn't make it okay, but it just helps. It helps. Yeah. Because you know that you can help other people along their journey as well.
That's right. Yeah.
And I really hope you get to do that.
I do too. Yeah, I do too.
I'm rooting for you.
Thank you. Yeah. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So if anybody would like to read Nicole's story, you can pick it up in the Women Like Me, Whispers of Warriors, Women Who Refuse to Stay Broken. Now that you've heard Nicole's story, you know why she is in the book, for women who refuse to stay broken. Well, thank you so much, Nicole, for having the courage to do this with me today. And I know that women are going to hear your story. They're going to read your story, and they're going to be helped by it. I know they are. Yeah,
I hope so.
So thank you for doing that.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.
Okay. All right. Take care. We'll talk soon.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Thanks for listening to Women Like Me, Stories and Business. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe now on your favorite podcast platform and tell a friend. Don't miss this opportunity to transform your life and business. Let the journey begin.